Stu and I, we do a lot of work in schools, and yesterday actually we were with a group of young people. They had just graduated. It sounds very grand, but they'd graduated as wellbeing ambassadors, and they were now starting the journey. These teenagers were now starting the journey of supporting young people in their school. So I'd love to tell you, we will tell you a bit more about that at the moment. But more generally, what we see is that our work is very much focused on young people, but looking at schools and education. And Stu and I do a lot of work in education. So we thought it might be quite helpful just to give you an overview today of what we see is like the current situation in education, what educators are up against. Often what educators and leaders think that their school needs for well-being, and what we offer, which is maybe slightly different than what they're looking for initially. And then we'll talk about some of the projects, and I certainly want to talk about this project with these young people because it was completely inspiring and had me in tears. And ultimately, our kind of wish is to bring well-being from the inside out into the culture of schools and what that actually means and whether we're doing that or how far away we are from it. So that kind of gives you the idea of the flow of what we were hoping to talk about.
No, that sounds great. That sounds really good. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, and that in the main, our work over the last few years has been with leaders in schools, and the schools that we've worked in have all been state schools. And as Liz says, it's been really interesting that what they think they need is not what we're particularly interested in. So we sort of go in, we go in disguise in a way. We go in as a bit of a Trojan horse, but knowing that what we've got to offer, we believe, is the most useful thing that they'll ever know about. And what happens when the leaders get to see this for themselves? They say, "Oh, how do we share this with the children? They need to know about this." And so there's a real joy when that happens. And I'm sure we'll come on to that. The example of the project yesterday at this school in Exeter, St. Peter's, is really testimony to the wisdom of the school to want these young people to actually see something for themselves, which is what happened.
So how did you get started with this in the first place?
Well, good question. I mean, Stu's background is as a senior police officer. He was a detective superintendent in the police. He retired several years ago, and my background is as a BBC radio reporter. And so it's it is a little bit like, how did we get here then? What happened along the way? I mean, I know Stu will talk for himself, but certainly for me, I think I've always been a little bit nosy and curious about people. And that being a reporter, I was never really a journalist, a hard-hitting news journalist. I was much more curious about people's lives and what made them tick, and getting into their homes or into where they worked and seeing what they were passionate about. So really the work with coaching was a natural evolution, because coaching, I trained as a coach 15 years ago. Coaching was a way of connecting with people, and it was looking at how you supported people. It was very much part of my ethos. And that I guess, segued into starting my own business, leaving the BBC, and we just found ourselves involved in education. And the funny thing is, I actually went to teacher training college. I went to teacher training college it was a 4-year course. I went there for 2 years and thought, I don't know if I actually want to be a teacher. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hop out of this, do a degree, and then I always thought I can always come back into teaching if I want to. So I kind of get a sense that there's always been a bit of me that's been drawn in the way of education, and almost it's come full circle. And here I am back in schools. And we just find ourselves very inspired by the people in schools. Their hearts are absolutely focused on young people, one of the best for young people. And at the moment, the current situation in schools is pretty dire. lots of mental health issues for young people, lots of mental health issues for staff, high attrition rates, low budgets. The CAMS, the mental health service for young people and adolescents, that is absolutely at breaking point. People have got families who are at crisis point with the young people, often will have weeks, months, sometimes over a year before they get a first appointment. And these are people at crisis point, like that they're really in dire straits. So we really see that schools and the people within schools, the educators in our schools, absolutely want the best for young people. But at the moment, they're pulled in so many directions, and they themselves are finding it really, really tough and getting quite overwhelmed often with anxiety and stress, we find.
And the safety net that used to exist for schools, in other words, being well resourced, that's not there now. And so that applies to the public services, the health services. So, maybe go back a few years where a referral to CAMS would have been picked up and then support would have gone in for that young person. CAMS are saying it doesn't reach the threshold. You're going to have to deal with this yourselves. And so therefore that manifests itself in budgetary implications to have to get some further assistance in for a child that might need one-to-one support while they're going through crisis. It means behaviour issues, which have an implication, of course, with other children. Good learners are they're affected as well. Parents get sort of dragged in, and so on and so on. The whole thing is not very pleasant. And I think that schools feel that they're having to pick up the pieces for society's ills often. And what we're really, it's really interesting that the work that we're doing, because they think that in order to improve their world, that they need to deal with what we call the symptoms of a rubbish system. Let's put it that way. Whereas we're much more interested in going further upstream, and we know that that's where it all happens. That's the place to really start work with them. So that's the significant difference, I think, between what they want, what we're interested in, and maybe what coaching itself, conventional coaching, may have provided for.
Yeah, and I was just wanted to pick you up as well on what you were saying about the symptoms, because I really think this is key. What we see, and I've been there too, is we see our educators and the young people too, but we mainly work with educators. They are in a fog of anxiety, of worry, of exhaustion, mental exhaustion. They are finding it hard to sleep. They're finding it hard to spend quality time with their families. And what they're doing is that they're relying on their intellect and their old ways of trying to sort these problems out, which is, okay, I need to learn another strategy. I need to be better at time management. I need to make time for my children. It's almost like that they're trying to use this very busy part of their heads to help them. And what we're pointing to with the work we do, I think, is very different from what we might see conventionally, because a lot of teachers and leaders might come to us saying, I need to sleep better. I need to not be, I need to do more work. I need to work smarter. I need my teams to work smarter. I need this, this, and this. But really what they're doing is they're not settling down their system. They're revving it up further. And what we say to them and what we point to them is that the symptoms that they're feeling and seeing, anxiety and stress and snappiness and forgetfulness and worry and all of that, those are symptoms of your very natural, deeper intelligence letting you know that something isn't right. And the last thing you want to do is try and quell or quash those symptoms, because they're giving you good information. And actually, when Stu talks about going upstream, and I know we're going to talk about that a little bit more really, because that's ultimately what we're talking about. it's about really saying, this isn't about trying to suppress symptoms. This is trying to understand why they're being created in the first place and see. And for me, what this is about is helping people really dip back into their deeper intelligence. We call it your inner compass, that part of you that kind of knows that this isn't right. And if you learn and relearn or recognize it once again, you start to understand that the deeper intelligence will give you really good information about how to look after yourself and others. So that's kind of what we're about.
Mm.
So I'm interested though in about the money side of it. So you said that there's a shortage of money in the system and no budget for all of this. So how is what you're sharing going to help that? I mean, is there money to do that?
I mean, it's a great question, and we're often asked about that. You know, how is this funded? And frankly, if they really want it, then they'll find the money. But actually, what we see, the implications of the work that we're involved in, the real benefits will impact on sickness, and the amount of money that's spent in schools on supply teaching is colossal. Colossal. We had a group of head teachers on a training program recently, and one of them rode up late and he said, "I'm really sorry," he said, "but we've had to make some judgment calls today on whether we call in supply teachers for the number of teachers who called in sick." And he said, we can't do one for one because our budget won't allow it. So we're having to prioritize the areas, the classes that we think are the most important, to require a supply teacher to come in. So just in terms of the overall well-being of a group of leaders, for example, who are all experiencing this in school, and who just get to work better with each other. You know, there's no guarantee with this, as we know. We know this. We're not going in and making crazy promises, but we know that when we get to see that there's something else going on, in this deep intelligence that exists, that we talk about, we know that colleagues are going to be much more supportive, much more considerate for each other, much more aware, self-aware, aware of the impact on colleagues. They're going to be able to see when somebody's going down a rabbit hole, and have that sort of friendly, supportive conversation, which is, "Hey, you know, I think you might have gone down a rabbit hole there," and then "Oh God, there we go again." But we've actually seen this with a team, and they're finding that life is different. And of course, the way that reverberates around the school is that other teachers see that too. They're starting to see leaders who are much more in tune with who they truly are, as opposed to this self that they think they are. So that's a very simple way of saying, look, there's a real payback here, in terms of staff well-being, in hard currency where they're not actually spending so much money, for example, on supply teaching. And you want your best teachers to be at school. You know, supply teachers are great, but really you don't want to fill your school with supply teachers. So that's one way, but there's no getting away with it. The budgets are an issue for schools, and where they're having to make decisions about, you know, whether they have in a small primary school, whether they have 3 classes or 2, means a huge amount. That's a big decision for school to make. So yeah, those are a couple of examples of you know, the impact of budgets on schools and big decisions that need to be made. And of course, our stuff really isn't the essential stuff that they need to provide for. So for example, safeguarding training, they're obliged to provide that. And quite rightly, we want statutory. Yeah. We want them to have good safeguarding procedures in place. So you know, our training would be seen as, well, it's nice, it's optional, and it's a real shame, because what we see is that if our training, if our support if the learning of the internet understanding is prevalent in schools, life is going to be so much more easeful around the school.
Yeah, I can see that. So if there's far less stress amongst the staff, which is what I think you're saying, there's far less stress amongst the staff, and then presumably far less stress amongst the children too, because then that's going to save money. And if what you're offering was statutory, that would make a lot more sense, really, wouldn't it?
Well, that's right. I mean, that's what
we'd say.
We would say, of course. And of course, in education, there are steps that can be taken to have people who are experiencing mental health delivery in each school, and it remains to be seen how effective that might be. But of course, their approach will be different than ours.
Yeah, and what about, is there research to prove that that what you're doing? I mean, I know what you're doing is working, but is there actual research to show that yet?
I don't know. We took out, in fact, we meant to look at it, didn't we? The project, we ran some research on a group of people that we work with about 18 months ago, a group of middle leaders. And it was all around well-being, and it was a sort of qualitative and a little bit of quantitative. We used the Warwick Edinburgh scale, and we got a researcher in to support us with it. And it shows, I think, I can't remember the exact wording, but it showed a significant shift, I think, didn't it, in people's sort of understanding of well-being. And it's a really interesting one, and I know that schools absolutely look for research and evidence to kind of underpin some of the work that they do. And I guess if I'm really honest, there's a part of me that finds it hard, because what we're pointing to and what we're really wanting to offer is that schools get back in touch with something that's very natural, like say schools, students get back in touch with something that's very natural. It's kind of not really measurable. So, for example, those young people that we told you about earlier that we were with yesterday, they naturally have in abundance compassion, love, well-being, this desire to support others, that is who they are. And that naturally emerges when the stories, the fears, the insecurities, and the anxieties fall away. I don't know how you measure that. I don't know that I want to measure it, because then it becomes a how-to. It's like, okay, what we need is this to come into our schools so that we can now have more of that love, compassion, and well-being. And actually what we're saying is that what we're offering is an understanding that you don't need to chase well-being. You don't need to chase, or you don't need to teach youngsters how to be compassionate or confident. It's who they are in the absence of this crowd of stories and thoughts that can cloud up their lives. So it's a really great question, and I guess the answer is we're not really hot on the research. We have done a bit of research. It kind of seems to say, yeah, this is useful. But ultimately, I don't know, it's not quite where my heart is, Stu. I feel like I'm fudging a bit here.
Well, it was funny, Anne, because on the first day of this research project, we had them complete a form.
This is the one in the school with the middle leaders.
Yeah. And so they're all given this form. I think there were about 20 odd people.
Yeah.
And this Warwick Edinburgh form, which is a fairly standard well-being indicator. And on the back, the researcher suggested that we ask them a question, or two questions. And it was something like, number one was, do you ever suffer with stress? And number two was, what do you think the cause is? And so we dished this out, and they ticked the boxes on the first sheet, turned it over, and then they started to write. And they were writing, and writing, and writing. And Liz and I were looking at each other thinking, writing? And eventually, when they finished, there was reams of things like our work-life balance, poor leadership, marking, no home life, poor diet, don't get time to go for a wee at work, blah, 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 blah. And this was on day 1. And at the end of day 3, so it was a 3-day training, at the end of day 3, which was 2 months later, we asked the same questions. And so they turned over, and the majority, well, they certainly didn't write as long for a start. There were still 1 or 2 that were saying, I still don't see how this stuff can help me deal with poor leadership, for example. And they're responsible for my stressful health. But the majority had a change in the way that they saw things. Now we've got that report, and we could quite willingly send you a link to it and take it for what it is. I always urge caution with these sorts of reports, as Liz said. They are just a moment in time, and we put such great stock in them. And I think overall the report was favourable. The researcher, she came down for a day with us, and she was in tears just by some of the things that people were saying about how they saw for themselves, how their lives were different. You know, so that was really beautiful. So yeah, we know there's research. There's been I know Elizabeth Lovia is one of your contributors. She's in touch with other research that's been done on this work, but our very limited piece of work is favourable, and we're very willing to share.
I think it's the results that you see in the difference in people's lives, and also things like how many people are taking less time off work, for example. That must be a big thing in the long run. So you know, even if there's no, it's always difficult to say in any case, I know. But so tell me a bit more about what you're actually doing then.
Well, so we're working in different areas within the school. So you talk about the leaders maybe, and I'll just talk about this project with young people. So last year we ran a conference called Resilient Young Minds, and there was a small legacy pot of money a profit that was made from this conference. And we wanted that, we always said that if there was any profit, that we would reinvest that back into a community project for young people. And so yesterday was the fruition of that project. And we went into a school in Exeter in Devon in the UK, and it's a secondary school, so a high school, that kind of, I think that's the right terminology for people in the States. And we worked with a group of 12 young people and a very inspirational teacher. And there were 2 trainers. I was actually part of the group and just kind of observing and being part of the ride. And we shared what we call the inside out understanding with these young people. And we use metaphors. We use things like, we call it the diamond, like young people getting back in touch with their diamond, who they truly are, understanding that they can plaster a load of rubbish back around this diamond. That's not who they are. The diamond is always within. So just helping them start to see that. And these young people, yesterday we had the head teacher there, the leadership team, the governors, their parents came along. We actually had leaders from other schools come along as well. And we just really celebrated sort of the fruition of this journey of them just getting an understanding themselves of how life works. And they naturally now just want to go and support others, and have started that already in their school, supporting their peers and younger students. And they're really excited. They've all got these like little badges that they pinned onto their tops, their shirts. They're really excited now that they call themselves dignity ambassadors. They're going to be really supportive of others in the school. We're going to run we've still got a small amount of money left, which we're going to invest in a project for a primary school and run something similar, slightly smaller scale, in a primary school, and that's going to start probably in the autumn term. We're going to kick things off this term just to meet some of the youngsters. Now, talking about budgets and funding, those projects for schools, they know that they're really important, but they are like the cherry on the icing on top of the cake. It's like they're really hard to fund. So we're actively starting to see with Resilient Young Minds, and that's Resilient Young Minds just represents a group of like-minded people that want to support other youngsters. We're really looking to see how we might reach out into our wider community, maybe the business community, maybe a philanthropic community, maybe a charity. We're not entirely sure, so that we can start to fund these projects, because whilst the school maybe has got so many other things they've got to actually statutorily do, we see that these aren't actually the cherry on the icing on top of the cake. We see that this work is foundational for changing a culture within a school. And it's almost like we've got to have eyes for that, because the educators are so caught up in all the other stuff they've got to get on with. So that's the next stage of exploration for us. And that's one of the projects we've been involved in.
And just picking up on the future piece of work with one of the schools, the interesting thing there is that we're currently working with the head and the deputy head from that school. And I think that gives us a real bit of leverage in the school, because with the work with the children, when we're not there, then the head and the deputy, they're present, they're seeing these children daily, and able to just keep them ticking over, and be that bridge between members of staff who aren't familiar with teaching and training that these children are experiencing for themselves. And one of the things the deputy head teacher said to us is, he's called Russell. He's a really great guy. And Russell says, the real difference for me now is that when I work with these children, and they have some real difficulties. These children, some very difficult circumstances in their own home lives. Often, he says, I'm having conversations with them from the honest belief that I can see beyond their problems. I can see who they truly are. He says that perceptions that these kids need fixing, that they're broken, he said, it's changed everything for me to know that that's not true. And he says, I'm having completely different relationships with them. Wow, that blew me away when he said that. So, for example, that expression that no one is broken, which was the tagline for the Resilient Young Minds, that can be really quite challenging for people who all the training, their real life experience is telling them something completely different, that these children do need fixing. So actually, we're really aware of that, and yet really clear for ourselves and in our communication that these children aren't broken. Nobody needs to be fixed.
So, and I want to tell you about some of the other stuff we do as well, which is the leadership. Yeah, which I was hoping we could just...
Okay, so there's a program that we've been running for a few years now called Coaching for Leaders. Now we call it coaching, and we sort of have a laugh at ourselves, which is, we don't really know what to call it. But anyway, we call it Coaching for Leaders because at least the expression coaching is something that they're familiar with in schools. And in fact, teachers are using a coaching style with children all the time. And yet when they have conversations with each other, particularly leaders, often they find it quite difficult to maintain a coaching style. It's either a mentoring approach or telling, which is not what we're advocating. But the Coaching for Leaders program, we did one this last academic year with 9 head teachers in Cornwall, in the west of Cornwall. And that's a blend of live training and one-to-one coaching, which each of them experiences over an academic year. And that's it's a very rich curriculum. It's not a curriculum really, but it's a very rich experience where where we work with them face to face in a training environment. They're developing relationships with each other, which beyond the training, they've got a different relationship than they had before with their peers and colleagues. And the one-to-one coaching has been well, it's always lovely. It's my favourite bit. And we've done 2 consecutive programs with this multi-academy trust. And the multi-academy trust system in the UK, one of the advantages is that they can actually pull in training like ours and finance it from the centre. Although schools have to contribute, but a school in itself will find it very difficult to be able to pay for this sort of training for the school itself. So we have to think of other creative ways, like the one at St. Peter's that Liz has talked about with the young people. We've actually financed that, or through the Resilient Young Minds conference, it's been financed. So we're always looking for ways to generate income. That would be our wish, that we had a big pot of money that we could draw on and pay trainers to go in and actually share this with schools, because I think that would be the quickest and most effective way of actually getting this out there.
And so yes, definitely, that would be amazing. And we're really drawn to work in the community. And oh my goodness, down here in the southwest of the UK, Devon, Cornwall and Dorset in particular, and well, Somerset too, we've got Rani up in Somerset too. But we've got, I tell you what, there's a lot going on. And last year we ran, there was 4 trainers and Anne Buckingham supported us, but there was Claire Tanner, there was Dr. Rani Bora, who's a psychiatrist, Stuart and myself. We ran 3, we call them Wellbeing Ambassador training programs in the Southwest, and in Devon actually. And we were looking to reach out to people that wanted to make a difference in their community, whether that was teachers in their schools or parents or somebody that might want to, doctors, GPs, drugs workers, charity workers. We had a whole range of people came on these programs. And so we really see that there's it's almost like the dots are starting to join. We've got the projects in schools, the work we're doing with leaders, the work that's happening in the wider community, wellbeing ambassadors. We've got Dr. Rani Bora, a psychiatrist who really is seeing the inside out understanding and supporting her clients in this field. We've got teachers out in the field. We've got Claire Tanner, who's done lots of extraordinary work in the health service. It just feels as though there's a lot of things starting to emerge from the grassroots up, which is, I think is really, really exciting. It has a sense that the time is right. It's like, I think people are starting to go that there must be something else. There must be a different way that we can engage in our world. And yes, there is. And we really feel that what we can offer and what there is and the support around can really help engage people back in touch with who they truly are. And then that naturally then spills out into them seeing and listening for wellbeing in others. And wow, wouldn't that be an awesome foundation for society?
It certainly was. What's coming to my mind is what's going on in politics in the UK at the moment, and in the world, actually, in the US as well. And what a difference it would make to the politicians and to our parliaments and to the governments and so on if they had this understanding. So how do you see the culture in school changing? What's your vision of that?
Well, you had a really lovely description. We talked about this yesterday. So if you could say that.
Yes, well, my absolute dream and aspiration is this. I would love it if we never ever had any well-being training classes ever again. I would love it if teachers, educators, families, parents, governors all just knew that they were okay, the kids were okay, that there was some that they were connected to this deeper intelligence. And then they taught maths and English and art and all the other stuff that they teach was just taught from this space. I would love it if, for me, that is a culture change. A culture change for me isn't that you can list all these classes and good things that are going on in the school. For me, that would just be a natural byproduct of a healthy system. You wouldn't even be proud of it. It would just be like so obvious and ordinary. That is what a culture change is. Now, I'm not sure we're that close to that.
and I would like to think that the results would look after themselves anyway.
Yeah. The academic results, you mean?
Any results, anything that's measured and anything that's not measured, I think there would naturally be an upturn, change, an improvement with a school that operates from the way that it is described it.
So people might be wondering, what exactly is it that you're sharing with these people? What are you? I know that's, you may not be able to go into that in great detail, but how is and you said about the deeper knowing that no one's broken and knowing that there's an inner guidance. How do you know that? Or how is that how do you know, how is this different from what other people have been?
Yeah. Well, I'll start. You might have to come in.
Okay.
Well, we both trained as I call it conventional coaching. And it was really interesting yesterday. We were invited to a regional conference, and it was conventional coaches. And I had to sit in my hands and tape up my mouth. But, we know the training that we experienced was really focused on tools and techniques. And my own experience there was that, well, sometimes they seemed to work and sometimes they didn't. Isn't that interesting? If they were consistent and they work consistently, then that would be really, really powerful. So what is it that's going on when some people experience some sort of insight or transformation? As a coach in the conventional methods, I used to think that was thanks to me. Perhaps, maybe, yeah, been a bit flippant, but there would be some sort of sense that it was the tool or technique and the skill of the coach that was able to elicit some form of transformational change for the coachee. Well, of course, what I know now is that it's not down to me at all, and that I'm not doing the work as a coach. I'm just pointing to something that exists consistently in us all, which we overlook, which is that true self, which is who we say is who we truly are, and not that separate self that we believe we are. The separate self that's constantly chasing, pursuing, having to prove, having to impress, isn't good enough, is anxious. So we're having some real fun in saying to people, well, you see that person, that's who you might think you are, but actually that's not who you truly are, because the person who you truly are is this awesome man, woman, this diamond, resilient, loving, resourceful, generous. That's who you are. And we'll draw on evidence that they've maybe given to us at some point during the conversation where that is true and where they see that for themselves. So that's the sort of difference that we're playing with clients.
Yes, and I just want to sort of pick up on that really, because, for years I was, oh my goodness, I was on this self-development journey that I can't tell you how. I mean, I've got these old, I'm looking over here because I've got a little bookshelf, and I dug up an old diary, a journal I know when I was working at the BBC and I was learning about coaching then, and I would be writing furiously about setting good goals and being a better person and doing meditation and fitness and health, and it was like I was so busy trying to fix myself. I really saw that I should be a better version of myself. That was my journey, and I would feel guilty and I would feel anxious, and then I'd try and fix the guilt and anxiety, and then I'd try and be a better person and try and squash these limiting beliefs. And it was a bit, I don't know if you've seen it. Have you seen those? We call them basher moles. You kind of get them at the fairgrounds. You've got these little, they're not real moles, okay? You've got these little electronic, mechanical sort of mole heads that come up, and you've got this mallet and you're trying to bash them. And I was like that with myself. It was exhausting trying to improve myself. And so I find people at some degree on that kind of spectrum of either trying to sort themselves out or trying to sort other people out. It's like, well, if they're better, if they were sorted, then I would be happier. So you're either doing it for yourself or you're trying to sort other people out. And at some level, I think we all there's something inside us that knows there must be another way. That's not the way to live our lives. That isn't what it's about. And we're almost like having people start to look inward to that little knowing within that kind of says there must be another way, and to start trusting it, and to start sort of, again, I might be mixing metaphors, but it's like there's a spark there. It's like let's blow on that. There is a deeper intelligence. There's a deeper knowing. Let's start to get used to seeing, what does that feel like for me? How do I see that in myself? What is it kind of pointing me to do next? And we're gifted. It's both a gift that we have with our incredible intellect and our imagination and our processes of thinking about the future and planning. But it can also be a big inhibitor, because what we can do with this extraordinary gift of imagination and thought is we can create untold stressful scenarios that will never happen, that we try and then fix in the present moment. And all that we're doing is that we're kind of revving up our thinking, trying to sort something out that's never going to happen. So this is about saying, it's about having people realize the difference between that anxious, revved up feeling of bashing those moles, and that kind of sort of more settled, deeper, like, oh, there's something else. There's a deeper intelligence. Let me start to trust this. What is this? And to give that time and space. The beauty with it is there's nothing to do as a tool, technique, or strategy. I would say it's more of a kind of curiosity. And as you become curious, it naturally just kind of beautiful metaphor is a flower that just naturally opens up and blooms, as does that when we just kind of notice. And so that's what's different about what we're talking about. It's kind of hard. Someone said it's a bit like trying to catch smoke. It is, but that's ultimately what we're saying. You think that life shouldn't be like that, you are right. And there is something else. Listen into that something else. That's where the richness lies. And that's what we're helping people to reconnect.
So if someone is feeling, it's interesting, isn't it, that they may feel drawn to if they can't do something themselves other than funding, maybe they would want to be funding something like this. What would be the benefits of funding what you're talking about, do you think?
As Liz said, that we're really interested in the wider community, as well as specifically in education. My dream is to see schools as being the heart of communities. Yeah. There are many hours of a day a school is never used. There are many hours, many weeks of a year a school is never used because of holidays. I would love to see schools being that little centre of learning for each community. And I think that we could have a part to play in that. But one of the things that is an example of the simplicity of what we've been talking about, which is part of our training, and we encourage it, is we encourage people to be actually listening out for well-being in each other. Now, that sounds very simple, but people who are not familiar with it find it really difficult. They find it really difficult because they're used to their busy heads coming up with solutions and what you should do is this, and have you tried that? And we're encouraging them to be actually really looking for signs of well-being in the other. Because when the other actually sees that for themselves, that they are resourceful, they have wisdom in abundance, that they can work things out for themselves. That is a very simple idea that will change an awful lot. It changes relationships. So back to your question, and I think that you're maybe asking how can people help with this in their communities? Well, they can get in touch with us for a start. We'd be really happy to point you to people that maybe in a different part of the country that could be very useful for them to have conversations with, or certainly if they're in the Southwest, or even from across the water, anywhere in the world. If anybody wants to get in touch with us about how they think that they might be able to help, we'd be delighted to hear from them.
And I would just like to say as well, I really saw it in those students yesterday. If we want a world founded on compassion and love and understanding and connection, it's already here. It's like, we don't have to chase it, it's here. All that's happened is we've kind of fallen asleep to it. We've got lost in it. Our young people are much closer to that than we are. It's a bit like, and so they haven't got so much stuff going on that they've learned and they've got kind of hovering around their heads. We went away for 5 weeks, and when we came back, our garden went from tidy to a jungle. We've got a lot of work to do in that garden to get it looking kind of respectful again. It's the same with our young people. If we can work with our young people before all that growth of insecurity and limiting belief takes over, then we're actually starting to clear and build the world on the very qualities that are innate within us all, and are just waiting to naturally emerge. So I would, these projects with young people, they make such a difference. They are so relatively cost effective. We do need funding to support our young people because it's not statutory. There isn't money in the public services to do that. So I would say, particularly with Resilient Young Minds, that's a place that we really see that potentially as being a place that we can, with the right support, we could really make a difference in the communities and schools around us. So yes.
Wonderful. So is there anything else that you think we haven't covered that you'd like to say before we...
I think it's following on from Liz, and it is about funding and people being able to find money for this. I don't think we need to make this work expensive. I think that we're not in this to make money. What we just have to give it away, and we're asking trainers to actually do this work. We need to pay them a reasonable amount for this work. They have to pay the bills. So it would take away a lot of the anxiety if we could go to schools or maybe other organizations and say, look, we bring the funding as well, or we bring a part of the funding and make it really, really affordable for them. This school yesterday, they were just so thrilled the head teacher was just bristling with his pride in seeing these young people really flourishing. Some of the comments that they were saying about how they were experiencing life differently for themselves, just very simple things. You know, I'm not getting as anxious about my homework as I used to. Even something like that in a household can take a lot of stress and anxiety away from the from the issue. So, yeah.
Well, I think just to add to that, which is exactly what you're saying, is that what we see that this makes a real difference. It's really affordable. If you want to stake and if you want to invest in something, if you actually want to invest in the future, this is the place to invest. It really is. So yes, I think we've said enough, but that was the point we wanted to make.
Yeah, that's really great. Thank you very much. Okay, so the links to where you are, how people can get in touch with you, and so on will be under the video very soon. You know, within the next few minutes, so that people can get in touch with you and offer you lots of money to fund all of this. That'd be really, really good. So thanks really very much for being here, both of you. And
thank you.
I'll be seeing you again soon.
Thanks, Anne.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.